Lebanese armed group Hezbollah says its top military commander has been killed in Syria. Mustafa Badreddine is said to have been responsible for Hezbollah's military operations in Syria since 2011, where they've been fighting in support of the regime. It's not clear at this point how he died, but Israel has carried out several airstrikes on Hezbollah fighters in Syria in the past. Well, Badreddine has led Hezbollah's military operations for decades. He's suspected of being the bomb maker behind an attack in 1983 on US Marines in Beirut. 241 Americans were killed. In 1984, Kuwait sentenced him to death for a series of bombings, including attacks on the US and French embassies, but he escaped from prison during the Iraqi invasion. Badreddine was also tried by the UN Special Tribunal for Lebanon over the assassination of former Lebanese Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri in 2005. Well, for more on this, we're joined by Renad Mansour. He's a fellow at the Carnegie Middle East Centre based in Beirut. Renad Mansour, good to speak to you today on TRT World. So how does the death of Badreddine affect Hezbollah's military capabilities?
Well, I think for a long time we've known that Hezbollah has been sort of overstretched ever since it entered the Syrian civil war, having to kind of have its Lebanon presence, of course, but also now to send, thousands of fighters to Syria to support the regime over there. So this very much does go into show that Hezbollah are sensitive and do have some issues in Syria, and it's overstretched, and we have to question it. You've had thousands of Hezbollah fighters dying, and we have to question whether how strong the group is and what the result of the Syrian quagmire will be for the group.
And Renad, how is Hezbollah's involvement in Syria seen in Lebanon?
Yeah, so initially, Hezbollah was reluctant, let's keep in mind, to get into Syria, but it only got into Syria after it felt it was necessary, and that was at a point when the regime in Syria, the Bashar al-Assad regime, was on the back end and was retreating. And since, for example, the Battle of Qusayr, which Badreddine was a very important player in, Hezbollah has been able to help the regime to reach the offensive. Now, so Hezbollah has been very cautious to make it seem like they're not taking any risks in Syria. What they're doing is supporting a regime, but also making sure that Islamist groups like the Islamic State and others don't come into Lebanon. And so far, Lebanon hasn't fallen into the civil war of Syria, which was the biggest fear when Hezbollah entered. And the fact that Lebanon has to somehow managed to stay on the brink, but not yet fall into the civil war, is important, I think, amongst, as perceived amongst the Lebanese.
Absolutely. Now, not much is known at this point about the circumstances of Badreddine's death. Who do you think might be responsible, and how was he targeted in this way?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, this is someone who, when he went to Syria, he said, I'm only going to return as a victor or a martyr, and clearly he's returning as the latter. We still don't know what the circumstances surrounding his death are. The rumors have gone from everything from it was an Israeli airstrike seeking, Israel seeking to take advantage of Hezbollah, as I say, being overstretched to target them in Syria, which is it's done in the past, or even who was controlling the airspace. Why, if Russia controls the airspace of Damascus, what sort of implications that has. So it's really hard to tell right now. All we're hearing so far are rumors, conspiracies to some extent. But this is a fighter who was fighting in a war. I mean, these things, as we know, happened in war.
Absolutely. And Renad, how have the Syrian regime reacted to this news?
Clearly, as I mentioned, from the Battle of Qusayr a few years ago, Hezbollah's involvement has been very integral, has been critical for the Syrian regime. And so obviously the loss of a senior commander of this paramilitary group that has been supporting the regime will be seen as a loss to the Syrian regime. Of course, they'll send their condolences, but in any case, the regime is in a much better position today than it was a few years ago, and a lot of that has to do with support from Hezbollah and other groups.
Well, Renad Mansour, we have to leave it there, but thanks for joining us here on TRT World. Thank you.